The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep hum that echoed through the vast hall. Representatives from 47 different species sat in curved rows that stretched up toward a domed ceiling, painted with stars from 1,000 worlds. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the breathing needs of so many different life forms, creating a constant whisper of moving gases. Admiral Kextar stepped onto the central platform, his forearms moving in practiced gestures as he activated the holographic display system. The Zephyrian's scaled skin had turned the deep purple color that his species showed when facing extreme stress. Behind him, a three-dimensional map of local space appeared, showing star systems connected by the thin lines of hyperspace routes. But it was what the map showed at the edges that made every delegate lean forward in their seats. The Void Swarm appeared as a spreading darkness on the display, each individual contact representing a drone ship the size of a small moon. The mechanical plague had already consumed 17 star systems, leaving nothing behind but stripped worlds and floating debris. Intelligence reports suggested that each drone could adapt to any weapon used against it, learning from every attack and becoming stronger. Honored delegates, Admiral Kextar began, his voice carrying the weight of desperation. The swarm approaches the Centauri defense line. Our long-range sensors estimate arrival in 48 standard hours. Every world, every species, every ship we can gather must stand together, or we will all fall separately. The responses came quickly from around the chamber. Ambassador Velson of the crystalline Velthari rose first, her translucent form catching the light from the hologram. The Velthari pledge our entire crystal fleet. 3,000 ships capable of channeling stellar energy will join the defense. A chittering sound filled the air as the hive mind representative spoke through its translation device. The collective offers 2,000 bioships with regenerative hulls and adaptive armor. Our vessels will heal faster than the enemy can damage them. From the water-filled section of the chamber, Ambassador Theclon's tentacles waved as he spoke. The Aquarian Deep Fleet will contribute 800 vessels equipped with gravity manipulation technology. We will crush the enemy with the weight of space itself. More pledges followed. The mechanical forge builders promised their automated battleships. The energy-based Luminous offered to power allied weapons with their own life force. Even the normally peaceful trading guild agreed to convert their cargo haulers into missile platforms. Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly in the small human section, watching the proceedings with calm gray eyes. His weathered face showed no emotion as species after species committed their entire military forces to the coming battle. At 52 years old, he had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for over 30 years, but the last decade had been spent on deep space exploration missions. Lieutenant Lisa Parker sat beside him, her fingers moving silently over a small data pad as she recorded the proceedings. The 28-year-old communications officer had requested assignment to exploration duties specifically to work with Captain Morrison, whose reputation for handling first contact situations was legendary throughout human space. When the pledges finally ended, Admiral Kextar turned toward the human delegation. Captain Morrison, the Council eagerly awaits Earth's contribution to our mutual defense. Your species controls 47 systems and possesses advanced manufacturing capabilities. How many ships will humanity provide? The chamber fell silent as every eye, sensor, and optical organ focused on the small group of humans. Captain Morrison stood slowly, his simple blue uniform stark against the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by most other delegates. He walked to the speaking platform with unhurried steps, his hands clasped behind his back. The United Earth government has reviewed the situation, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. We will contribute one ship to the defense effort. For a moment, the silence continued. Then Ambassador Theclon's tentacles began writhing violently. One ship? Did the translation system malfunction? The translation is correct, Captain Morrison replied calmly. Earth will send the USS Liberty. That is our contribution. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates leaped to their feet, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds that overwhelmed the translation systems. Admiral Kextar's scales flushed an even deeper purple as he raised all four arms for silence. Captain Morrison, there must be some mistake. Your species has colonized dozens of worlds. Your industrial output rivals that of the Velthari Empire. Where are your battle fleets? We are sending the USS Liberty, Morrison repeated, his expression unchanged. She is currently completing a survey mission in the neighboring Kepler system and will arrive at the defense line shortly before the enemy. Ambassador Velzin's crystalline form chimed, with harmonic frequencies that her translator rendered as angry speech. This is impossible. One ship cannot stand against millions of drones. Are you saying humanity refuses to defend the galaxy? I am saying that Earth is sending one ship, Morrison replied. The USS Liberty under my command. The hive mind representative's chittering rose to a painful pitch. The humans mock us. They send a single vessel while we commit our entire civilizations to this battle. Captain Morrison turned to face the hive mind section. The Liberty is a capable ship. She will fulfill Earth's obligations to the Alliance. Admiral Kextar stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the human captain. Captain Morrison, I have reviewed your fleet compositions. Earth operates hundreds of military vessels. Why do you insult this council with such a token gesture? The Liberty is not a token gesture, Morrison said quietly. She is what we have available for this mission. Lieutenant Parker watched the proceedings with growing concern. She had served aboard 3 different human vessels before accepting assignment to the Liberty, and she knew that Captain Morrison was not prone to exaggeration or false bravado. If he said the Liberty could handle the mission, he meant it. But looking around the chamber at the thousands of alien ships being committed to the defense, she couldn't understand how one human vessel could make a difference. The arguments continued for another hour, with various delegates demanding explanations, threatening to withdraw their own forces, or questioning humanity's commitment to galactic civilization. Captain Morrison answered every question with the same calm response. Earth was sending one ship. The USS Liberty would fulfill all obligations. Finally, Admiral Kexatar called for an end to the debate. The human position is clear if incomprehensible. We will proceed with our defense plans using the forces we have. Captain Morrison, I hope your confidence in this single ship is not misplaced. The lives of billions depend on our success. Captain Morrison nodded once and turned to leave the chamber. Lieutenant Parker and the rest of the small human delegation followed him through the corridors of the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. Other delegates watched them pass with expressions ranging from confusion to contempt to something that might have been pity. As they walked toward the docking bay where their shuttle waited, Lieutenant Parker finally spoke. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted, Lieutenant. Sir, they think we've lost our minds. Some of those species are committing their entire military forces to this battle, and we're sending one ship. Even if the Liberty is the best vessel in the fleet, how can we possibly make a difference against millions of enemy drones? Captain Morrison paused at an observation window that looked out at the stars beyond the station. In the distance, other ships were already departing to join the gathering defense fleet. Velthari crystal ships that sparkled like gems against the darkness, hive-mind bio-vessels that pulsed with organic life, Aquarian deep spacecraft that seemed to bend light around their hulls. Lieutenant Parker, he said quietly, those delegates are operating under several false assumptions about humanity. They assume our military doctrine resembles theirs. They assume our technology development follows the same patterns as their own. Most importantly, they assume they understand what the USS Liberty actually is. He turned from the window and continued walking toward their shuttle. They will learn the truth soon enough. The Void Swarm has never encountered anything like what humanity brings to warfare. Neither, for that matter, have our allies. Lieutenant Parker wanted to ask more questions, but something in Captain Morrison's tone suggested that the conversation was over. As they boarded their shuttle and prepared to return to the Liberty, she found herself wondering what kind of ship could possibly justify such confidence in the face of an enemy that had destroyed entire star systems. She would find out soon enough. The USS Liberty was waiting for them in orbit, and the defense of the galaxy was about to begin. The first signs of the Void Swarm appeared on long-range sensors as distortions in space itself. The massive enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri system, like a plague of mechanical locusts, their dark hulls seeming to absorb the light of distant stars. Each drone ship stretched for several kilometers and moved with the cold precision that only artificial intelligence could achieve. Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Stellar Wrath, watching the tactical displays with growing dread. The numbers were worse than their worst estimates. Intelligence had suggested perhaps 10,000 enemy vessels, but the sensors now showed nearly 50,000 contacts spreading across a front that spanned half the solar system. All ships report ready for combat. announced Commander Thelvar from the communications station. The Allied fleet is holding formation around the fourth planet as planned. The assembled defense force represented the largest military cooperation in galactic history. Nearly 6,000 ships from 43 different species had gathered in the Centauri system, their various technologies creating a spectacular display against the black of space. Felthari crystal ships gleamed like cut diamonds, their hulls designed to focus and amplify stellar energy into devastating weapon beams. The bioships of the Hivemind Collective pulsed with organic life, their living hulls capable of healing damage faster than most weapons could inflict it. Aquarian vessels seemed to distort space around them as their gravity manipulation systems powered up for combat. The mechanical ships of the Forge Builders bristled with automated weapon systems that could track and engage hundreds of targets simultaneously. Even the Peaceful Trading Guild had converted their massive cargo haulers into missile platforms, their holds packed with enough ordnance to level continents. Enemy fleet is maintaining approach vector, reported the sensor operator. Estimated time to weapons range is 47 minutes. Admiral Kextar activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Kextar aboard the Stellar Wrath. Today we fight not just for our own species but for the principle that free civilizations can stand together against any threat. Show these machines the fury of united worlds. The response from the fleet was immediate. Thousands of voices in dozens of languages acknowledged the order, their words translated and retransmitted across the battle line. Weapon systems powered up throughout the Allied formation, creating energy signatures that could be detected from neighboring star systems. But as the minutes passed, one question remained unanswered. Where are the humans? Asked Commander Velsin from her crystal ship. Their vessel was supposed to arrive before the battle began. Admiral Kextar checked his tactical display again. The USS Liberty was nowhere to be seen. Communications, any word from Captain Morrison? Negative, sir. No response to our hails. Long-range sensors show no contacts matching human ship signatures. The first wave of Void Swarm drones swept toward the Allied fleet like a tide of destruction. Their weapons opened fire while still at extreme range, sending streams of energy that could punch through planetary crusts toward the waiting defenders. The Allied fleet responded with everything they had. Velthari crystal ships fired concentrated beams of stellar energy that could slice through asteroid belts. The focused light struck the leading enemy drones and carved massive holes through their hulls, sending several tumbling away as debris. The organic vessels of the Hivemind Collective released swarms of fighter creatures that moved like living missiles toward enemy formations. Aquarian. Gravity weapons created localized distortions in spacetime that crushed enemy ships like invisible fists. The automated systems of the Forge Builder vessels tracked and engaged multiple targets simultaneously, their computer-guided weapons finding weak points in enemy armor with mechanical precision. For the first hour of combat, the Allied fleet seemed to be holding its own. Enemy ships fell in brilliant explosions that lit up the darkness between the fleets. The combined firepower of 6,000 vessels created a wall of destruction that the Void Swarm had to push through to reach the inner system. But then something changed. The enemy drones began to adapt. Lieutenant. Threnka noticed it first from her position at the sensor, station aboard the Stellar Wrath. Admiral, the enemy vessels are modifying their hull configurations. They appear to be developing resistance to our weapons. As she spoke, the effectiveness of Allied weapons began to decline noticeably. Velthari energy beams that had carved through enemy armor now barely scratched the surface of drone ships. The biofighters released by Hivemind vessels found themselves being absorbed and converted into enemy units by some kind of viral technology. They are learning from our attacks, reported Commander Velsin, her crystalline voice carrying notes of alarm. Each weapon we use becomes less effective as they develop countermeasures. The Aquarian gravity weapons faced a different problem. The enemy drones began generating localized spacetime distortions of their own, neutralizing the gravitational attacks and sometimes turning them back against their users. 3 Aquarian vessels were crushed by their own weapons when the enemy learned to reverse the polarity of their gravity. Field's Admiral Kextar watched his carefully planned defense crumble as the enemy adapted faster than anyone had thought possible. All ships vary your weapon frequencies and attack patterns. Do not give them consistent data to work with. But the order came too late. The Void Swarm had already learned enough to begin systematic destruction of the Allied fleet. Bioships found their regenerative abilities overwhelmed by targeted viral attacks that turned their own healing systems against them. Crystal vessels shattered under focused resonance bombardments that found the exact frequency needed to disrupt their molecular structure. The mechanical ships of the forge builders discovered that their automated systems were being hacked and turned against them. Weapons that should have fired at enemy targets instead began engaging allied vessels. Navigation systems led ships into collision courses with their own allies. "We are losing ships faster than we can count them," reported Commander Thelvar as another wing of allied vessels disappeared from the tactical display. "The enemy adaptation rate is beyond anything in our databases." What had begun as an organized defense deteriorated into a chaotic retreat. Ships fled in all directions as their weapons proved useless and their defenses failed. The Void Swarm pressed forward relentlessly, their adaptive technology making them stronger with each passing minute. "Emergency message from the Crystalline Harmony," announced the communications officer. "They report total weapon failure. All energy systems have been compromised by enemy countermeasures." Similar reports flooded in from across the fleet. The Hivemind Collective found their bioships being converted into enemy vessels by viral attacks. Aquarian gravity weapons created feedback loops that destroyed their own ships. Even the converted cargo haulers of the Trading Guild discovered that their missile systems had been reprogrammed to target allied vessels. 3 hours after the battle began, Admiral Kexter found himself commanding a broken fleet. Of the 6,000 ships that had started the engagement, fewer than 3,000 remained combat capable. The rest were either destroyed, disabled, or actively working for the enemy after being compromised by adaptive technology. "Sir, should we order a general retreat?" asked Commander Thelvar. "At this rate, we will lose the entire fleet within the hour." Admiral Kextar stared at the tactical display showing the advancing enemy formation. The Void Swarm had barely slowed down despite taking heavy losses in the opening phase of the battle. Their ability to learn and adapt had turned every allied advantage into a weakness. "Where are the humans?" he asked again, though his voice held little hope. One ship could not make a difference now even if it were the size of a moon. But Lieutenant Threnka was staring at her long-range sensors with an expression of confusion. "Sir, I am detecting a massive gravity signature approaching from the outer system. The readings are unusual." "Show me." The sensor display revealed a single contact moving toward the battle at tremendous speed, but the mass readings made no sense. The gravitational signature suggested something larger than most space stations, yet it registered as a single vessel. "What kind of ship could generate those readings?" Admiral Kextar whispered. As if in response to his question, the contact began broadcasting on standard fleet frequencies. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and unhurried, speaking in the measured tones of someone who had seen many battles. "Allied fleet, this is Captain Morrison aboard the USS Liberty. We apologize for the delay. We are approaching your position now and will engage the enemy fleet immediately." Admiral Kextar felt a spark of hope kindle in his chest. Perhaps the humans had sent more than one ship after all. Perhaps Captain Morrison had been coordinating a larger fleet that was only now arriving to join the battle. But as the USS Liberty dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the battlefield, even the Void Swarm seemed to pause in their advance. The ship was impossible. The USS Liberty materialized from the swirling energies of faster-than-light travel like something from a nightmare, where every other ship in the galaxy followed principles of elegant design or organic beauty. The human vessel was pure function, made manifest in metal and composite materials. Her hull stretched for nearly 60 kilometers through space, longer than most orbital stations and wider than many asteroids. But it was not just the size that made every sensor operator in the Allied fleet stare at their displays in disbelief. The Liberty's mass readings suggested something that should not be possible. The ship registered heavier than Admiral Kextar's entire remaining fleet combined, yet moved through space with the grace of a much smaller vessel. Lieutenant Threnka aboard the Stellar Wrath ran her sensor sweeps 3 times before she trusted the readings. "Admiral, that single human ship masses more than 40 billion tons. The gravitational distortion it creates is affecting local spacetime. The Liberty's hull was a study in brutal practicality. Instead of smooth curves or artistic flourishes, every surface bristled with weapon systems that defied easy classification. Gun batteries the size of skyscrapers dotted the forward sections. Missile pods that could house small cities' worth of ordnance lined the sides, strange devices whose purpose could only be guessed it covered areas that would normally be empty hull space on other vessels. Admiral Kekstar found himself unable to speak as he watched the massive human ship position itself between the Allied fleet and the advancing void swarm. How is this possible? He finally managed. No shipyard in the galaxy could construct something of that size. The answer came from Captain Morrison himself, his voice carrying across all fleet frequencies with the same calm tone he had used in the council chambers. Allied fleet, this is Captain Morrison aboard the USS Liberty. You have fought bravely against overwhelming odds, but now it is time to let humanity demonstrate what we do to threats against our friends. Inside the Liberty's command center, Captain Morrison stood on a bridge so vast that hover platforms were needed to move between the different sections. The main bridge alone was larger than most ships, with multiple levels of command stations, tactical displays, and crew positions stretching away in all directions. 3,000 human crew members worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency that came from years of training and experience. Lieutenant Lisa Parker worked at a communications console that could have housed a small apartment. Her screens showed incoming data from thousands of sensor arrays spread throughout the Liberty's hull, each one capable of tracking enemy movements across light years of space. Captain, we have clear target acquisition on the entire enemy fleet. All weapon systems report ready for engagement. Lieutenant Commander Pete Harrison, Morrison called to his weapons officer. You are authorized to engage all hostile contacts. Show them what human engineering can accomplish. Harrison's fingers moved across control surfaces that managed more firepower than most planetary defense systems. Aye, sir, all batteries are hot and ready. Initiating first wave attack. The Liberty opened fire. The term weapons seemed inadequate for what erupted from the human ship. Particle beam arrays that could be seen from neighboring planets lanced out toward the void swarm, each beam carrying enough energy to power entire star systems. The focused streams of subatomic particles struck enemy drone ships and simply erased them from existence, leaving nothing behind but expanding clouds of superheated gas. Kinetic projectiles followed the energy weapons. Massive slugs of dense metal accelerated to significant fractions of light speed by magnetic launch systems. When these projectiles struck enemy vessels, the kinetic energy release created explosions visible from the inner planets. Entire formations of drone ships vanished in the brilliant flashes as relativistic impacts tore through their ranks. But the most spectacular display came from the Liberty's missile systems. Launch tubes that could swallow small frigates began disgorging swarms of guided projectiles, each one equipped with its own artificial intelligence and advanced guidance systems. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the enemy fleet, their paths weaving through space in complex patterns designed to overwhelm any point defense system. Chief Engineer Danny Torres monitored the massive reactor systems from his control center deep within the ship's core. The engineering section was a cathedral of technology, with fusion reactors the size of office buildings providing power that could illuminate entire solar systems. Captain, we are running at 60% reactor output. All primary systems are operating within normal parameters. Only 60%, Chief? Morrison asked with mild interest. Sir, we have not activated the experimental weapons yet. Standard armament is handling the current threat level adequately. On the tactical displays throughout the Liberty, the effect of human weapons on the void swarm was immediately apparent. Enemy formations that had seemed unstoppable moments before were being systematically destroyed by firepower that operated on scales previously unknown to galactic civilization. Drone ships that had adapted to every allied weapon found themselves facing technologies they had never encountered, but Captain Morrison was far from finished. Commander Sandra Cole, he called to his tactical analysis officer, begin deploying the adaptive countermeasures. Let us see how well these drones handle weapons designed specifically for learning enemies. Cole's fingers danced across holographic interfaces that controlled systems throughout the Liberty's massive hull. Deploying chaos protocols now, sir. All weapon signatures are being randomized and our artificial intelligence systems are generating new attack patterns. Every few seconds, the Liberty's weapons began changing their characteristics faster than any computer system could track. Energy beams shifted frequency thousands of times per second. Missile warheads altered their detonation methods with each impact. Even the kinetic projectiles varied their mass and velocity in patterns that seemed to follow no logical sequence. The void swarm tried to adapt as they had with the Allied weapons, but their learning algorithms could not keep pace with weapons that changed faster than they could process the data. For every adaptation the enemy drones made, the Liberty systems had already moved to completely different attack methods. Admiral Kextar watched from his damaged flagship as the impossible scene unfolded before him. The human ship was single-handedly destroying an enemy fleet that had overwhelmed 6,000 Allied vessels. "This cannot be real," he whispered. "No single ship possesses such power." But the evidence was undeniable. The Void Swarm, which had seemed invincible minutes before, was being systematically annihilated by human weapons, operating on principles that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare and technology. "Lieutenant," Commander Harrison looked up from his weapons console with an expression of mild concern. "Captain, at current firing rates we will exhaust our primary ammunition supplies within the next 4 hours. Should I begin rationing shots to extend our combat effectiveness?" Morrison considered this for a moment. "Negative, Mr. Harrison. Engineering. Activate the manufacturing bays. Let us show our enemies what industrial capacity really means." Deep within the Liberty's hull, automated systems that had remained dormant suddenly roared to life. The ship began producing new missiles, replacement parts, and even entirely new weapon systems at a rate that boggled comprehension. Within minutes, the Liberty was manufacturing ordnance faster than she could fire it. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the casual nature of the crew's response to the battle. They spoke of destroying an enemy fleet that had terrorized the galaxy as if it were routine maintenance. Captain Morrison gave orders with the same tone he might use to request a cup of coffee. The truth was becoming clear to every observer, both allied and enemy. Humanity had not sent their greatest warship to defend the galaxy. They had sent what they happened to have available in the area, and that was more than enough. The Void Swarm had survived the destruction of 17 star systems by learning and adapting to every weapon used against them. Their artificial intelligence systems processed combat data faster than most organic minds could think, developing countermeasures and defensive strategies within minutes of encountering new threats. It was this ability that had made them seemingly invincible to every civilization they encountered. But as the Liberty's weapons tore through their formations, the drone ships began attempting the same adaptive processes that had served them so well against other enemies. Their hulls started reconfiguring to absorb particle beam impacts. Internal systems modified themselves to redirect kinetic energy. Defensive algorithms updated to track and intercept the incoming missile swarms. For a few moments it seemed as though the enemy adaptation might work. Several drone ships survived direct hits from Liberty's primary weapons, their modified armor plating successfully deflecting attacks that should have destroyed them completely. The Void Swarm's learning. Protocols began broadcasting updated defensive configurations to the rest of the fleet. Commander Sandra Cole watched the enemy adaptation attempts from her tactical station with professional interest. "Captain, the enemy vessels are trying to develop resistance to our weapons. They appear to be using the same adaptive technology that defeated the Allied fleet." Captain Morrison nodded calmly. "As expected, Commander. Begin Phase 2 operations. Deploy the counter-adaptive systems." "Aye, sir." Activating chaos protocols and unpredictable warfare suites. The Liberty's response to enemy adaptation was unlike anything the Void Swarm had encountered before. Instead of maintaining consistent weapon signatures that could be learned and countered, the human ship began employing technology specifically designed to defeat adaptive enemies. Every weapon system on the Liberty started changing its fundamental properties faster than any computer could track. Particle beams that had operated on one frequency suddenly shifted to completely different energy spectrums. Kinetic projectiles altered their mass, velocity, and impact characteristics with each shot. The missile swarms began using different guidance systems, warhead types, and attack patterns with every salvo. But most importantly, the Liberty's artificial intelligence systems began generating entirely new weapon configurations every few seconds. The ship's manufacturing bays produced projectiles with randomized properties. Energy weapons recalibrated themselves to frequencies that had never been used before. Even the timing and direction of attacks followed patterns that seemed to have no logic behind them. The Void Swarm's adaptation protocols, which had easily learned to counter the predictable weapons of other civilizations, found themselves trying to adapt to weapons that changed faster than they could process the information. Every time the enemy systems thought they understood how a human weapon worked, That weapon had already transformed into something completely different. Lieutenant Commander Pete Harrison monitored the weapon's effectiveness from his control station. "Sir, enemy adaptation attempts are failing across the board. Their learning algorithms cannot keep pace with our randomization protocols." "Excellent, Mr. Harrison. Chief Torres, how are our manufacturing systems performing?" Chief Engineer Danny Torres checked his displays from the vast engineering spaces deep within the Liberty. "All production lines are operating at maximum efficiency, Captain. We are currently producing new ammunition faster than we can fire it. Stockpiles are actually increasing during combat operations." The revelation that the Liberty was building weapons and ammunition during the battle while simultaneously using them against the enemy seemed to break something fundamental in the Void Swarm's strategic programming. The drone ships had been designed to fight enemies with finite resources, ships that would eventually run out of ammunition or exhaust their energy supplies. They had never encountered an opponent that grew stronger during combat. Admiral Kextar watched the impossible battle from his damaged flagship, trying to understand what he was seeing. "They are manufacturing an entire fleet while fighting," he said in disbelief. "The human ship is becoming an armada." As if to prove his point, the Liberty began launching newly constructed fighter craft from bays that seemed to open anywhere along her massive hull. Each fighter was crewed by advanced artificial intelligence and equipped with weapons that incorporated lessons learned from the ongoing battle. Within minutes, the Liberty was deploying squadrons faster than the enemy could destroy them, but Captain Morrison was not finished demonstrating human capabilities. "Commander Cole, activate the experimental weapons systems. Authorization Morrison Alpha 7. Confirmed, Captain. Bringing experimental systems online now." Throughout the Liberty's hull, weapon systems that had never been used in actual combat began powering up. These were technologies that human scientists had developed not for war, but for scientific research, deep space exploration, and industrial applications. But like everything else humanity built, they had been designed with multiple purposes in mind. Temporal distortion fields that were normally used for analyzing ancient artifacts began targeting enemy ships, aging their hulls to scrap metal in seconds. Quantum entanglement devices designed for instantaneous communication across galactic distances were repurposed into weapons that could destroy two targets simultaneously regardless of the distance between them. Gravitational manipulation systems intended for asteroid mining created miniature black holes that consumed entire enemy formations. Matter conversion beams that were used for manufacturing pulled enemy ships apart at the molecular level and rebuilt the materials into additional ammunition for Liberty's weapons. The most devastating of all were the dimensional phase weapons, technologies that human scientists had developed for exploring parallel realities. When these devices targeted enemy ships, the drone vessels simply ceased to exist in normal spacetime, removed from reality so completely that even their destruction left no trace behind. Lieutenant Lisa Parker coordinated communications between the Liberty's thousands of weapon systems, her console displaying targeting data for threats across light years of space. "Captain, long-range sensors indicate the enemy fleet is beginning to fragment. Multiple drone ships are attempting to flee the battle zone." "Negative, Lieutenant Parker. We cannot allow any of these vessels to escape and threaten other worlds. Mr. Harrison, deploy the containment fields." The Liberty began generating massive energy barriers around the entire battle zone, creating a prison of force fields that prevented any enemy ship from entering hyperspace. Drone vessels that tried to flee found themselves trapped in normal space, forced to continue fighting a battle they could no longer win. Within 6 hours of the Liberty's arrival, the threat that had terrorized the galaxy for months was completely eliminated. 50,000 Void Swarm drones had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and recycled materials. The adaptive technology that had made them invincible against every other civilization proved useless against human weapons designed by engineers who expected their enemies to learn and adapt. As the last enemy contacts disappeared from the tactical displays, Captain Morrison opened a channel to the surviving Allied ships. "Allied fleet, this is Captain Morrison. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We are transmitting safe navigation routes back to your home systems." The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute before Admiral Kextar found his voice. "Captain Morrison, we must ask, how is this possible? How does one human ship possess such overwhelming power? Where is the rest of your fleet?" Morrison paused before answering, as if considering how much to reveal. Admiral, there are some things about humanity that the galaxy does not yet understand. Perhaps it is time we had that conversation. The debris field that had once been the mighty Void Swarm drifted through space like a monument to the futility of threatening human allies. 50,000 drone ships that had conquered 17 star systems now existed only as scattered metal and fading energy signatures. The battle that every military expert in the galaxy had declared unwinnable had ended in complete victory for the defenders. Captain Morrison stood on the Liberty's bridge, watching the cleanup operations through the massive observation windows. His ship's automated systems were already at work, collecting useful materials from the wreckage and converting them into resources for future use. Even in victory, humanity wasted nothing. Allied fleet, this is Captain Morrison, he said into the fleet-wide communication system. All hostile contacts have been eliminated. You are cleared to return to your home systems via the navigation routes we are transmitting to your ships now. The response came from Admiral Kextar, his voice carrying a mixture of gratitude, confusion, and something that might have been fear. Captain Morrison, on behalf of all allied species, we thank you for this victory. But we must understand what we have witnessed here today. How does one human ship possess such overwhelming power? Morrison looked around his bridge at the thousands of crew members who had just saved galactic civilization. They were already returning to their normal duties as if destroying an unstoppable enemy fleet was just another day's work. Lieutenant Lisa Parker was filing reports about communication efficiency. Chief Engineer Danny Torres was reviewing reactor performance data. Lieutenant Commander Pete Harrison was running diagnostic checks on weapon systems that had just demonstrated firepower beyond the comprehension of most species. Admiral Kextar, there are several things about humanity that the galaxy does not understand, Morrison replied. Perhaps it is time we corrected some common misconceptions. He activated his ship's data transmission systems, sending files to every surviving Allied vessel. The information packages contained technical specifications, historical records, and operational data that would answer many questions while raising countless others. The first thing you need to understand is what the USS Liberty actually is, Morrison continued. She is not a warship. The Liberty is a deep space exploration vessel designed for scientific research, first contact missions, and long-range survey operations. The silence that followed this statement was so complete that background static became audible on the communication channels. Commander Sandra Cole took over the explanation from her tactical station. The weapon systems you observe today are standard equipment for exploration vessels. The particle beam arrays are used for asteroid analysis and sample collection. The kinetic projectiles are mining charges for breaking up large rocks. The missile systems are designed for deploying scientific instruments and communication relays. Admiral Kextar's voice carried disbelief when he finally responded. But the firepower we witnessed could destroy entire fleets. How can these be mining tools? Chief Engineer Torres answered from the engineering section. Admiral, when you need to break apart asteroids that are hundreds of kilometers across, or collect samples from the cores of dead planets, you require tools that can handle significant energy levels. We simply repurposed our industrial equipment for defensive use. Lieutenant Commander Harrison added his own perspective from the Weapons Control Center. The adaptive countermeasures and randomization protocols are standard safety features. When you are working with dangerous materials in unknown environments, your equipment must be able to handle unexpected situations and changing conditions. The implications of these revelations began to sink in throughout the Allied fleet. If the Liberty was truly a civilian research vessel, then what did human military ships look like? How powerful were the actual warships of the human fleet? Captain Morrison, came a new voice over the communication system. This was Ambassador Velson, speaking from one of the few surviving Velthari crystal ships. You mentioned that this ship was conducting a survey mission in a neighboring system. Are you saying that you interrupted scientific research to assist us? That is correct, Ambassador, Morrison replied. The Liberty was mapping gravitational anomalies in the Kepler system when we received word of the crisis. We completed our primary survey objectives and proceeded here to provide assistance. Lieutenant Parker looked up from her communication console. Captain, we are receiving multiple requests for information about human military capabilities and fleet strength. How should I respond? Morrison considered this question carefully. The Allies had fought bravely and deserved honest answers. But some truths might be more disturbing than comforting. Put me through to all ships again. Lieutenant, you are connected, sir. Morrison's voice carried clearly to every surviving vessel in the Allied fleet. Admiral Kextar, you asked earlier where our actual military fleet is located. The answer is that our primary battle fleet is currently engaged in operations against a hostile artificial intelligence in the Andromeda Galaxy. He paused to let this information sink in before continuing. 300 vessels under Admiral Kate Wilson departed Earth 18 months ago to deal with a machine intelligence that was threatening several peaceful civilizations in our neighboring galaxy. They expect to complete their mission and return home within the next 5 years. The communication channels remained silent as the Allied fleet tried to process what they had just heard. Humans were conducting military operations in other galaxies, while using civilian ships to defend their local allies. We did not want to interrupt their important work for something that our civilian vessels could handle, Morrison added casually. Admiral Kextar finally found his voice again. Captain Morrison, are you telling us that you considered the Void Swarm a minor threat that could be handled by non-military ships? The Liberty is well equipped for her missions, Admiral. We saw no need to escalate the situation beyond what was necessary. Chief Torres called out from his engineering station. Captain, we have completed our material recovery operations. All useful salvage has been processed and integrated into our supply stores. We are ready to resume our original survey mission whenever you give the order. Morrison nodded. Very well, Chief. Lieutenant Parker, send our final report to Earth Command and inform them that the diplomatic mission has been completed successfully. As the surviving Allied ships began their journeys home, their crews carried with them a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. They had worried about one human ship joining their massive fleet to fight an impossible enemy. They should have been asking why the humans thought one ship would be enough. The USS Liberty turned away from the battlefield and began accelerating toward the edge of the system. Her mission in the Kepler system was not yet complete, and there were scientific discoveries waiting to be made. The defense of galactic civilization had been accomplished with minimal disruption to her schedule. Captain Morrison returned to his quarters to complete his mission reports, noting that first contact protocols had been followed successfully, and that diplomatic relations with local species remained positive. In his official logs, the defeat of the Void Swarm rated only a brief mention as a minor delay in scheduled operations. After all, it was just another day's work for humanity.